All right, let me get myself situated here as well. Welcome to Legal Luminaries, the Paralegal Edition, Season 3, where we spotlight innovators shaping the future for paralegal education and workforce development.
This season, we're focused on educating the future-ready paralegal, aligning curriculum with hiring signals, AI fluency, legal operations, and long-term career sustainability.
And today we begin with workforce readiness. What are employers truly looking for in 2026? And how can we as educators design programs that close the gap between the classroom and our actual careers for our learners? And joining us today is Tracey Perkins, MBA. She is a legal recruiting consultant, an educator, a paralegal practitioner, and founder of the Para Leader framework. And so I wanted to talk to you today, Tracey, about recruiters, because I asked my students, do you know who legal recruiters are in terms of the ecosystem, the legal ecosystem in which we exist? So I'm curious, from your vantage point, Tracey, as both a recruiter and an educator, what really differentiates candidates who get hired from those who do not?
That is a great question, $1,000,000 question. So putting on my recruiting hat is always interesting because being on the recruiting side, coming from the paralegal side, I just got to get the other side of the coin, right? And kind of learn and realize like what hiring managers are really looking for. It's not just about your skill set. That was one of the first things I saw, your technical skill set per se. Really, what I saw with hiring managers, paralegal managers, managing partners was, they're more interested in those durable skills and those soft skills and hiring people, not just hiring a skill set. And what I mean by hiring people, and this is something that I teach my students and encourage them to think about, their IP, your intellectual property, and your paralegal brand, because that's obviously what you want to highlight in those interviews. Because again, people are hiring people. What does that mean? Are you a problem solver? Can you critically think? Would I like, running a trial with you and being somewhere in the middle of nowhere, America for 3 weeks? Do I have to kind of pull answers out of you? Are you confident? So those types of durable skills and soft skills are really what I'm seeing now. And I'll give you a couple of examples. I've had paralegals go out for interviews that were 30-year trial paralegals, for example. And the feedback I got was, well, she was just a little too quiet, or it was like she was a librarian. It was like trying to pull teeth, getting her to answer a question. Or I've even heard hiring managers say, she's not confident enough. She has all this experience, but I need someone that's confident, that's going to hold the attorney accountable, that's going to keep the attorney in line so that we don't miss deadlines. So again, what we're really seeing are those durable skills and those soft skills: critical thinking, problem solving, time management, communication skills, confidence. And those are things that go away, from like a legal tech course. You got to kind of work that into your teachings and let students know and flex those muscles and skills so they understand what employers are really looking for.
I'm really loving the direction of this conversation, Tracey, because Kelly and I know that we're all very familiar with each other's body of work and expertise and what we really are passionate about, especially in this field. And I'm loving that you're really honing in on durable skills and soft skills, right? Because those competencies are equally as important as what I'm hearing from you from an employer's perspective, right?
Absolutely.
Not just being technically an expert, right, with regard to your capacity as a paralegal or a legal professional, but how do you blend that with these very essential, what Kelly and I like to say are human-centered skills? We're often talking to people and saying, you cannot AI the human out of humanity.
You cannot.
You cannot. And I wonder too now, because as paralegal educators, if we were to reverse engineer, right? These
Mhm.
expectations that you've laid out for us.
Mhm.
What do we embed in our curriculum
Mhm.
to encourage these types of skill develop, what we refer to as practical skill
Yeah.
development and acquisition?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually going to be presenting on this at the FB Spring Conference with Kai Williamson, longtime paralegal educator, also my mentor as well. But what we do is we bake certain things into our assignments, into our discussion models. We love to use real world, real case scenarios, for example. So for a legal research class, for example, it's not just about being able to, plot the case history of a certain case, but how do you put it in a memo? How do you simplify the information for the attorney? Do you even know how to write a legal memo? Because I always stress to my students, an attorney is not going to tell you what to do. They're just going to tell you what they need. And it's going to be up to you to read the room. Does this attorney prefer an email? Do they prefer memos? Do they prefer some long, drawn out summary that's in a binder with exhibits? Even those little things are part of that deliverable and that assignment. So we go into more of, it's not just about the legal research, but also put it in a memo. Act like you have to communicate this or raise a risk or a flag to your attorney or to your team. What does that sound like? Do you have proper written communication? Do you have proper follow-up? And just baking those types of things into the deliverable and into the assignment, in addition to that technical skill. Because again, we can teach anyone how to legal research, right? But it's all about, can you communicate? Can you communicate the legal research that you found or the risks that you found to your attorneys and to your team?
I love this, like Christine was saying, the direction of this, because it's really that framework for developing our professional identity, right?
Exactly.
And if we understand from the front end of starting that kind of like what Christine was saying, if we're reverse engineering the sort of from this
Mhm.
hiring perspective for the student or for
Mhm.
a new entry into this profession, how do we help them, kind of on this para-leader framework like you're explaining here? How do
Mhm.
we help others move from that sort of mindset of task execution to
Mhm.
being a leader, right? You are
Yep.
a leader on this team. You are a leader contributing to the team's success. And so how do we, sort of shift from that task execution to, leadership presence?
Exactly, exactly. And I can just give you a real time example. I know, a paralegal that has just joined a certain law firm, high volume practice, and gets there 2 weeks in, no workflow. The calendaring software isn't quite up to par. And, I'm talking to the paralegal and I'm like, hey, you got to run this up the chain, because this is just going to be a bearing on your work product and the deliverable that you create. So you have to be confident enough, but also trust your knowledge, trust yourself, trust your experiences, come up with a solution, and then communicate that and run it up the chain to the higher ups. And that's something that, quite frankly, we just aren't trained or taught to do, because it's not things that we readily think are in a job description for a paralegal. But these are absolutely the things that we do because we're usually the command center of a practice or, of a certain legal team or department. And that's also why I think it's very valuable in certain curriculums to have paralegals as instructors and professors as well, in addition to attorneys, because we do have that practical knowledge of being paralegals in the seat, and being able to deliver that knowledge to future legal professionals.
And I love that you highlight that, because when we're thinking about it from that educator, like the application of it, that in that educational space, right? And how we are encountering, as the educator, we're encountering these scenarios on a regular basis, right?
Yep.
And so in order to expose, others that are coming into this place who maybe have never operated within the legal landscape ever before,
Mhm.
to see how these sort of, decision making processes actually play out in
Mhm,
practice, right? And so
absolutely.
those case bases. So how do we look at this from the educator's perspective
Mhm,
of applying it, to
mhm,
developing personal identity within
mhm.
that professional mindset?
Yeah, that's a great question. What I tend to use and what I love to use are role play scenarios, real world, real case scenarios where I'll literally put my students in breakout groups. Someone is responsible for being the attorney. Someone else is responsible for being the paralegal. There's a risk or something that you have to flag. Let's walk through that. Let's practice that together. What are you going to say? How are you going to articulate it? So I'm a person that's kind of a doer. Like I have to do it to learn it. You can try to teach me and lecture me all day. I got to do it. So I like to bring that to my students as well because I feel like experience is one of the best tools of teaching, right? It's one of the best educational pieces you can use is actual experience. So we even do like mock interviews, for example, for my legal career skills class, where the students actually interview with real recruiters, real paralegal managers, so that they can see and understand the questioning. And also, we do real world scenarios where I'll say, hey, say you're in a mediation and like your attorney has a booger. you know, but
It
but you,
happens, right?
it's
Like this is real
happened.
world.
People don't
Because
think about this. How do you communicate that? Do you let him be embarrassed in front of the mediator? But say it's an attorney that, doesn't have a sense of humor. How do you navigate that? So, what I like to do is show the students that you are capable. You are capable of thinking through these scenarios. You are capable of communicating properly. So, the first thing I like to do is build their confidence, right? And let them know you deserve to be here. We are important. We do have value. We make an impact. And I do that on day one. And then as we move through the course, we just do these role plays, real world scenarios, mock situations so that they can get used to what it looks like and sounds like in practice.
And I'm going to take this a step further because I love this. This is something in our last episode of season 2, and you know her too, Tracy, our attorney Whitney Harvey, who is
Yes.
of the self-coached lawyer, right,
Mhm.
business. And Kelly and I really focused in on bringing in these coaching competencies
Mhm.
within not just the classroom, but also translating that into our workplace. How
Yes.
do we this is the time and we have the opportunity to do this, especially because we are all learning and shifting together
Mhm.
with this type of technology that we're all being faced with, right? And being expected to learn, to understand, and to apply appropriately. So what I love
Mhm.
about what you're doing in terms of this real world practical skill acquisition opportunity within the classroom in the safe space before we launch into our workplace is
Yep.
that we also give opportunity for reflection.
Exactly.
Whitney had really focused on this in terms of the coaching process, right? Is not only self-reflection and how do I assess myself?
Mhm.
How did I navigate that situation? And how do I receive feedback in that feedback loop from someone who is coaching me? And further, how do I apply that? And then measure that in terms of my wins or successes. So I'm really enjoying that piece that you're bringing forward to our community here as far as our paralegal educators in that yes, we need to build that confidence. We need to give them opportunity to
Mhm.
practice, but
Mhm.
also to build this process of reflection, self-reflection and
Yes.
reflection with our teammates. That is amazing. I want to kind of shift our conversation because we do talk about that marriage, that balance between our technical competency, right? As paralegals, especially, right? We are like the procedural experts of the team.
Mhm.
Like, I love this framework of the command center, Tracy.
Yes.
This is a great framework of how we
Mhm.
think about these things because we are like mission control. We are
Yes.
moving many parts, right, to get
Yes.
the thing done, whatever environment we're
Has to
in.
get done.
And,
Yeah.
and I know this about you because we know each other offline, and I love that, because we constantly have conversations about emerging technology and
Mhm.
how we're interfacing with this and what are we doing because we're the educators. How are we providing reliable training and
Mhm.
education and practice for our students in these new emerging technologies.
Mhm.
And when we were talking about Gen AI, and must have been almost, I don't know, a year ago or so,
Yeah.
but we were just
Mhm.
kind of chatting about it, and you're in our little mastermind group about it. And you had informed all of us, there was about 6 of us, I think, in that group. And you're like, well, because my brain works the way it does, I not only need to know what to do, I need to know why and how. Right.
Yes.
And so, what did you do, Tracy? I want you to share
Yes.
this with our listeners.
Yeah, so what I did was I enrolled in the Johns Hopkins University Whiting School of Engineering, generative AI and applied generative AI and agentic AI certificate program. So because I wanted to learn the technical side as well, I wanted to understand AI, I wanted to understand the tool and bridge that gap between the technical side and having that domain experience as a paralegal. And I am just so grateful that I did that because it's helped me actually get more opportunities, and just kind of thinking about workflows and the legal work that we do and what that looks like in a different way. And now also, I like to call myself a lifelong learner. What I can now do is take what I'm learning and give it back to my students and give it back to the legal community and back to the paralegal community. So I bridge a lot of my presentations now and understanding, like I just did one for PLI on AI versus actual intelligence and firms overlooking the actual intelligence that sits right there at your desk, and how these AI conversations have kind of overshadowing the legal professional that has the institutional knowledge, that has the legal judgment and discernment that we're overlooking in these AI conversations, and how we need to mirror these two things and not use AI as a replacement, but as a partner to your actual intelligence. So just understanding how AI actually works is what led me to that framework, because before I knew anything about AI, I'm like everyone else. I'm like, it's magic. It can do everything. Like, and it's like, no, it's just predicting, or it's just using statistics or just using math, and it's confident. So it sounds good. And when I realized that's all it's doing, it just was like a light bulb that went off in my head and just drove these further conversations and further educational pieces and knowledge that I wanted to give to the legal community and especially my paralegal students.
Oh, I love this. And especially because we see a lot of people kind of, when they're presented with this kind of new information and they're not the subject matter expert, what happens?
Mhm.
Fear state, fear state.
Fear.
Everyone's
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, this is going to come after my job. This is
Yep.
going to, it's just, and we even had, when Kelly and I did the last year's spring virtual conference for AFP, we did the future proofing the paralegal profession. And we started talking about Gen AI because we knew that people in our community needed the opportunity and platform to have these kinds of important discussions and
Absolutely.
discourse. Because at that point, there were people who were like, scorched earth, it's going to blow everything up. People are going to
Mhm.
be useless. They won't be able to think.
Yeah.
But we said, whoa, 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 whoa.
Whoa, whoa,
Let's
let's
start
slow
having a
down.
realistic
Let's talk about what's
conversation
actually happening.
happening on the ground.
Yeah.
We're talking about responsible, ethical,
Yeah.
professional use of it. How does it integrate into our workflows? How are
Exactly.
our workflows being augmented?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, in terms of because you've placed a lot of legal professionals in
Mhm.
roles from paralegals to attorneys, right?
Yep.
And
Yes.
I'm wondering, when you are placing these folks, what are employers' baseline expectations of this new emerging technology? Because not
Mhm.
everyone's using it. This is a
Yeah.
statistic I learned because I swear I'm almost on the CLE every day. And
Yeah.
I'm listening intently about this adoption of Gen AI and AI in our legal workflows,
Mhm.
etc. But I wonder what is happening in the workplace. What are employers expecting of people that they're onboarding?
Yes. People, what they're looking for attorneys and paralegals that can govern and that can solve problems. And when it comes to integrating that, especially with AI and legal technology, the conversation shifts a little bit from, oh, well, can you just use it, to, are you scared of it? Do you understand it? Can you solve problems using AI? And if I throw you into this workflow or into this practice, how can you help me become more efficient and drive successful outcomes for the client? And those are just the type of conversations that are taking place from the hiring perspective. Because to be quite honest, a lot of law firms and legal departments are still very fearful. And because we haven't seen that ROI just yet, because it's so new and it's the integration is so new. And what I'm seeing is that most firms are kind of in the early stages of experimentation and some sort of adoption, but it's not cohesive and it's not across the board. It's kind of like the wild, wild west right now. Um, so a lot of people are looking for subject matter experts, kind of like myself. I'm a paralegal, yes, but I also upskilled and got these certifications from Johns Hopkins. So now I can apply AI to solve some of the major problems or bottlenecks that we're seeing in some of our practices.
So what I'm hearing, Tracey, is opportunities abound.
Absolutely.
Right?
Opportunities. Yes.
Well, and I think that's just like sorry, Tracey, were you finish your thought? I think that's the beauty of this and what you're sort of revealing through, just even this dialogue in itself is that there's opportunities for us to all shine in those areas that
Yes.
really, fuel our fire.
Mhm.
And, just in you talking, explaining this sort of the baseline expectations that might be out there from an employer's perspective, it emphasizes how we have to understand what our baseline expectation is, right? Like understanding how, like you said, do we understand something? Are we proficient in something? Can we responsibly utilize the
Mhm.
tools that are going to be available to us? Because
Mhm.
depending on that climate that we enter into, we may be resource lean, we may be resource deep. We don't know what that it essentially looks like maybe from the front end and going in, but if we
Mhm.
have the fluency, we have some of that maturity. And I think that's what's beautiful of having educators like yourself and like Christine, who you both continue to educate yourselves, not only
Mhm.
through things like Johns Hopkins,
Mhm.
places like that where people really on the forefront, programs are
Mhm.
really on the forefront of what's happening now in the legal landscape, specifically with these augmentation abilities. But we're maturing, right? As we're going through that, our digital mastery is maturing at a level which allows then these organizations, which we are parallel to or work within, to mature and become more fluent as well, right?
Yes.
So that leads us to then start thinking of these pathways of opportunity even further, because this
Mhm.
is looking like what? Legal operations,
Yes.
cybersecurity, data and
Yes.
privacy, like where is it that fuels your fire, right? And
Mhm.
that's going to plug into so many different areas of law. It's no longer, oh, do you want to go into criminal or civil, right? Like, or do you
Exactly.
want to sit in a law office or do you want to go in-house, right?
Mhm.
And so many, though, that what we kind of see, right, from the paralegal educators in this space, we're seeing some of our colleagues still really thinking that this legal operations is like some advanced concept, right?
Yeah.
And that employers are not expecting to have legal professionals coming in that understand workflow and process. So how do
Exactly.
you so how are you looking to bridge that gap for
Mhm.
us as educators so that the students, the future workforce benefits from this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's funny because that's exactly why I chose as a paralegal instead of going to law school, but I chose to get my MBA because I thought I wanted to be an attorney, right? Like most of us start out. And then I became a paralegal and I became obsessed with the business of law, how we make money, human capital, how we're using our paralegals. Are we leaving money on the table? Because you just don't don't even understand that your paralegal can do these types of things, or you don't understand that your paralegal to some degree is a legal operationist that understands the workflow, that can put these efficiencies in place that drive profits and successful outcomes. So I went back, got my MBA, learned all of these like business models and leadership tools. And I was just like, oh my goodness, I need to integrate this stuff like SWOT analysis, Porter's, the 5-balance scorecard, for example. If I can implement this into my daily practice and my work as a paralegal, now I'm just thinking on a whole different level. And that's a whole nother way that paralegals can stand out, because you're thinking about strategy. And it takes you from being a task executioner to a strategic influencer, because you understand how the task and the work that you're doing on a daily basis directly plays into that operational and that business strategy that drives the firm and creates competitive advantage. So these are the things that I teach and put into my paralegal students. The number one thing I tell them on day one, which is, I like to call it like my paraleader bylaws. Number one, we are a profit center. And the sooner you understand that, the sooner you understand that you have impact, you add value, you start to look at the work differently. And you start to look at yourself differently. And that's how I start to build on that confidence. That's how I start. I start with that. You're a profit center. Remember that. You're your own conglomerate. Your IP is IP. It's intellectual property. So tell me, why do I want to hire you? Or why do I need you on my team? And I can tell you it works, because I've benefited from it and using it, and I'm not toting my own horn, but I tend to not really have problems getting jobs. Just when I flipped the coin and thought of this from a business perspective and how we can drive profits leading to competitive advantage for our law firms and legal departments.
Well, and it's the really deep beauty that I see in that approach, and in really embedding this in our curriculum, is that we're creating future leaders, right?
Yes.
And that's the key here, because understanding, like you said, we're underutilized, we're often undervalued, all of
Absolutely.
these things. And so coming in and being superwoman is going to be nearly impossible, because nobody's going to see it or
No one
acknowledge it,
sees
right?
it. It's the invisible labor. They don't see it.
Not at all. And so by
Mhm.
doing it, by contributing in such a manner where it's high level, like you said, that next level leadership stuff, where
Mhm.
we're really contributing as a strategic partner to the
Mhm.
operations of the firm, right? Or of the
Mhm.
team, or of the department, or of the company, or of the however, whatever you're plugged into there.
Mhm.
So when we look at that, how do we develop what sorts of exercises or assignments
Yeah.
in the scope of curriculum do you like to implement to help
Yeah.
drive this home for your students?
That's a great question. I have one example I can give you is a billing assignment that we have, because a lot of people don't understand. One of the firms that I was at, I was really good at my billing descriptions. It was an insurance defense firm. So the attorneys, I got tasked, unfortunately, with doing all of the appeals, because for some reason, my billing always got through. And it was
Oh,
literally just because of my descriptions, because I was able to show how I moved along the case, how I made an impact, or how I added value, even just in my billing description. So I
mhm.
do bake that into when I'm teaching our students how to bill, for example. Yes, this may slide as an okay description and you may have a loosey goosey client, but in order for that invoice to get paid, which translates to profits, which translates to your billable hour requirement, you need to make sure your descriptions are ironclad, for example. And you can do that by showing the impact that you made or the value that you brought to the team or this case or client just with this task that you're doing. So this is a proper billing description, for example, in my mind. So I bake things into that way, getting them think about it in a different way, because no one teaches us that. No one teaches us how important billing is to a law firm. You kind of just find out if you're like me from the old school. I mean,
Right.
I'll be completely honest. Early in my career, I'm like 23 years old. I got fired because I didn't know how to bill. I didn't understand it.
Mhm. Yeah, well, I mean, it is an art. There's an art to it, right? And
Yes,
there's also a learning curve, and there's also, different
absolutely.
nuanced layers of this depending on if you work on the defense side or the plaintiff side, or like all of this
Definitely.
stuff, insurance or not. And so what
Yes.
what really just struck me in there is how this the way. Okay, so one of the ways in my classroom that we teach this, I just say, okay, so we're on a team, a legal team. There's three attorneys and one paralegal and a legal secretary on the team. And we have a meeting about one specific project.
Mhm.
What do you think a client would expect to be billed for?
That's right. That's
And
right.
that they're going to be okay with paying for,
Yep.
to accommodate for that 45 minutes of every single person's time in that room, right?
Mhm.
So when we're thinking about that, the client is looking at this and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to pay how much money for 45 minutes of time spent?
Mhm. Mhm.
We better all have some very valuable work product that was a
That's right.
result, an outcome of this strategy session. And if we
Exactly.
just say meeting, not all of us can bill for this
Not
meeting.
all of us can
So
bill for it. Now you're getting
exactly.
triple and
So
quadruple bills.
so
Yeah.
yeah, but like that intelligence, that sort of business acumen that you're discussing here, that we think it comes at us at this high level thing that we're
Mhm.
like, oh gosh, of course we don't understand the business operations within the
Yeah.
underbelly of a law firm. But those little details are what actually drive this home, right? So
Absolutely.
yes, billing exercises, and you may see you don't want to go to a place where you have to bill, right? Because
Exactly.
it's scary.
Exactly.
But a lot of us that you learn so much about those operational details
Mhm.
by having to do these tasks that you're like, I just remember us having those discussions, Christine, like death by the billable hour. Oh my God,
Yeah.
and that's all there is here. But the beauty of that is that we learned how to make, draw value out of our time. And
Exactly.
that
That's what it's about.
realization for our, employer is huge. And that's where we like to emphasize this. So Christine, I know that we're going to kind of, actually, I'll just say this, Tracey, let's kind of transition what this
Yeah.
looks like. Like you were already discussing this, closing the gap from that classroom to the
Mhm.
career. And I think
Yes.
Christine has a really good question that she wants to ask about this because we've been chewing on this for a little. Christine, you want to take it from here?
I do, but first, I want to say how amazing was that discussion and dialogue between the two of you, because that is what we call a teachable moment, right?
Absolutely.
Or like how we reframed it, it's a coachable moment
Yes.
in a sandbox where we can
Mhm.
practice and
Yes.
learn from these experiences, right?
Mhm.
And I think what I heard from you, especially that's really resonating with me right now, Tracey, is trust yourself, or in other
Yes.
words, trust your power. And I
Mhm.
also like to tell the students, own your power.
Mhm.
Because that's leverage.
That's
That's leverage
leverage.
in the discussion, the fluid discussion and dialogue on ourselves,
Yeah.
in terms of negotiating our own compensation packages and pay,
Absolutely. Yeah.
right? Teachable
Yeah.
moments. These are the types of candid conversations we should be having with our learners within the classroom so they understand those nuances that we
Mhm.
cannot teach them out of the textbook alone, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
So my next question to you, Tracey,
Mhm.
is around what Kelly had just said about that closing that classroom to the career, right? Or to the workplace. And, not only is this a really opportune time for our students, learners to develop additional skills, right?
Mhm.
For these emerging technologies and other opportunities that lay ahead for them because of this development of new types of roles within our own legal ecosystems and opportunities even in business, right?
Mhm.
When you do have those legal skills and you've developed that and you have those chops and you can really use that and leverage that into other opportunities within
Yes.
business. And so
Absolutely.
I'm wondering, as paralegal program educators or even paralegal program directors. This means opportunity for us too, in the
Mhm.
way that we teach the traditional, right? Many of us are ABA approved paralegal programs, right?
Mhm.
So we have a
Mhm.
foundation that we need to teach to make sure that it is instructive to our learners. But I'm wondering the beyond that,
Mhm.
beyond that, what can we teach or what adjustments do we as paralegal program directors, what should we be looking out for or adjustments we should be making in the next few years?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, the biggest thing that I'm seeing, especially with the emergence of AI and legal technology, is the paralegal role is going to elevate. We're elevating. So, again, we're talking about, can you build a workflow? But the first thing you have to understand is the work, the flow, right? And a lot of times it's the paralegal that's closest to that on a day-to-day basis. Say you're a litigation paralegal, for example, or you're a corporate paralegal. You're usually the one from beginning to end at every phase, every step. So that actually gives you a closer insider look on the daily of how the operations is executed, how the strategy is executed. Because yes, we have legal operations professionals, for example, but they aren't as close to the work as we are. So how is the tools that we decide to use or the process that we're using, how does that show up day to day in practice? And that's the knowledge that paralegals have that, quite frankly, attorneys don't really have that skill set per se, even legal operations per se, because we are the ones that are closest to the data and closest to the work. Now, I brought up the word data, right? Something that I'm starting to see a huge emergence of is like cybersecurity, data privacy paralegals, governing and compliance paralegals. So you're still doing the paralegal functions, but at such a high level, right? Because we're the ones, again, closest to that work. We're protecting the evidence, we're protecting the data, and we understand these workflows, where the data goes, what vendor to use. We're the ones having those conversations. So again, this is where the whole like paraleader framework and paraleader institute derives from, is not waiting to be called on, not waiting to be asked, but seeing the opportunity where you can assert and insert your institutional knowledge and help drive that competitive advantage. And that is showing up, especially with AI, through governance, compliance, data privacy. So the more you know and the more money you can save your firm or potential malpractice suits, for example, that's the better you position yourself and the more opportunity. Now, of course, most of us go on to get our MBAs and then we do become legal ops professionals. But I even wrote an article on this as well, where I would like to see more of us kind of still keeping that paralegal title, but the paralegal title shifting a little bit. So I'm not just a litigation paralegal, for example. I'm a governance paralegal, or I'm I'm an AI paralegal, or I'm a workflow assistant, whatever. But there are these great titles and opportunities that are coming up now, especially for paralegals, because we are the ones that are driving the technology and we're on the forefront on a day-to-day basis. So that just opens the door for us for leadership and professional development opportunities. And that's where the whole kind of paraleader institute, paraleader framework kind of derive from.
Wow, that is outstanding. And I know with Kelly too, because this is kind of an ongoing discussion between Kelly and myself is we talk about, remember like when we took Spanish in high school
Yeah.
and how we had the lab that accompanied that because we had to practice.
Yes.
We don't have that. There's no more apprenticeships.
Yeah.
There's no more, experientials where there's like internships that are required or anything of that nature.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so Kelly and I were having this conversation like, why are we not partnering with our tech partners? Right? And
Absolutely.
having them build us sandboxes and giving us these kind of assignments. Because Kelly, right? Are you not talking to e-discovery technology provider about this?
Right. Well, I mean, because we see they're creating these tools to solve the pain points that we're experiencing on a day-to-day basis. And I
Mhm.
mean, historically speaking, in my career, every time I've encountered a situation, on the data or tech side that I can't, engineer the solution. Like, it's something somebody with a lot bigger brain than me can, create for us here. So I go to those people and I say, here's our problem, help me solve it. And they've done it beautifully. That hasn't changed over the course of 25 years. It's just their technologies and the innovations are so much more advanced.
Yeah.
And so like understanding that the relationship with the people
Yep.
is what allows me to access that information and that resource so I can plug it in. And so when you look at that, as far as, small law firms who don't have the resources, the actual human power in order to locate, identify, find the resources that they even need. So they just bump through, and a case that should only take 4 to 6 months takes 3.5 years to litigate.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it is a dump of money and resources for everyone, so understanding that efficiencies have narrowed so much because of this one professional, category of us, these paralegal superstars. But it's because of the periphery teamwork that allows us to overcome the pain points and these challenges that we will continue to encounter.
Absolutely.
Because modernization, right? Digital age, we're just at the front end of this right now, guys.
Yeah.
Right?
It's all about the cross collaboration and cross disciplines, right? So getting together with that person that has the tech side, knowing that you have the domain experience, for example, as a paralegal, and how can we solve this problem? And that's exactly why I went to JHU to get my certification, so that I could understand these things. And I love the program because they teach, that's what the program is about. They're like using AI to solve problems, not using AI to solve daily real world problems in your industry. That's kind of the framework of the program. And how can you build or code based on the problem, but using AI to even help you build that code, for example. So it even takes it a step further of like, you don't have to be a data engineer or a data scientist to understand this stuff, because now we even have AI that can serve as kind of like a teacher's assistant, right? So that's something that I also do bring to the classroom is, for example, I know Christine knows this. I contacted Spellbook. They are an AI contract management program. And I said, hey, do you guys have any licenses or whatever that you can provide for our students so that we can really work with the software and they can really see it and understand the process? And they were like, absolutely. So we got free licenses for all of our students so that we can really work with Spellbook, for example, throughout the course. Same with my legal research class. I don't just teach them from the module. I share my screen, I go into Westlaw, and I show them my process, or how I would do something as a paralegal, or how I would utilize this AI tool. And there's been a lot of students, quite frankly, who are like, I hate AI, especially because of the environmental impact that it does have. And we absolutely have to be mindful of that. So then I challenge my students like, okay, well, you're going to have to use it most likely at some point, or some sort of legal technology. How do we use it efficiently? Right. And that's really from understanding the tool, understanding the workflow. A lot of times we're going backwards as well. We're implementing these tools or these technologies and processes without understanding our workflow. How does work come in? Where does it go? Who does it go to? Do we have internal assessments that this client requires, for example? And again, paralegals are usually the command center, or we're there day to day, and we understand all of those nuances. So we're the ones that are cross collaborating and, just trying to make everyone else look good.
Chris, I just love that, Tracey. I love how also, though, you're kind of, all these fears that we might be, dabbling into, how they all start to sort of intersect. So,
yes.
And that it's, really upon us to do that, right? And how as paralegal educators specifically, how we move forward in teaching how raise the bar, right? And
Right.
not just for us, right, for the future paralegals, but for our colleagues as well,
Absolutely.
in how we, are retaining this information. So
Mhm.
kind of similar to what you were talking about, developing these relationships with those tool providers, right? And so currently in the we have a e-discovery provider, we have
Mhm.
e-filing, we have all of these different specialty tech niche areas that we're exposing the children, the children,
Yes.
exposing the children to, no, exposing our future workforce to, so that when they come into a new employer, they're not like, oh my gosh, I've never seen this thing before, right? Because you know how
Exactly.
many things that are going to be thrown on them that they haven't seen before. And so if we can
Exactly.
take one of those off of that shelf to say, hey, look at what this interface even looks like, and look
Mhm.
at how quick it is for me to now e-file something, because it's not worrying about I'm going to hit the wrong keystroke and get the whole everything wrong here, because errors are going to happen. And so that's that confidence thing, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
By
Absolutely.
connecting the students, not only are we giving them exposure to be familiar with these interfaces and dashboards, but it's building their confidence to ask the
Yeah.
questions they need to fully
Yes.
understand it, so they could go to who they're working with to establish themselves as the leader in this, right? And say, hey, you know what?
Exactly.
I found a database, or I found a platform that's going to work for this problem that we've been discussing.
Mhm.
And the beauty of that, of how we're empowering, right,
Mhm.
the future professions, because also I even think relationally, are
Mhm.
some of these students developing a relationship with these technology providers just out of the exposure to them? And I know that
Mhm.
that happens right away. We have a student, a TA, a teacher's assistant in our paralegal program at University of Washington, who was a prior student who came from technology, and now he got 3 job offers while he was in the paralegal program because of a panel we did. And
Yeah.
he was like, I never imagined this ever before in my whole entire life, like that this
Yeah.
is what I would be doing, or that I could do this because I went through a paralegal program, right?
Yeah.
We don't know what we don't know, right?
Mhm.
And so Chris, so when we do that, how do my final question, I guess, Tracey, for you is,
Mhm.
how do we really embed teaching this sort of professional level mindset, right? Leader
Mm.
mindset,
Yes.
um, in our curriculum?
Mhm. Mhm. That's a great question. So I already mentioned assignments, right? And like the role plays and all of that kind of stuff. Something else that I do, and I'm very transparent with my students on day one. I always tell them, and I got this quote from Michelle Obama: practice the person today that you want to be tomorrow. So if you're a person, and I also am a huge advocate of the book Atomic Habits. I love that book. And just kind of making those 1% changes on a day-to-day basis, changing that perspective, changing that mindset, changing your environment, and then everything else starts to change, right? So he always uses the example of, like, you have two people, they're trying to quit smoking. Someone offers the one person a cigarette, they say, no thank you, I'm trying to quit. The person that is really trying to change the habit says, no thank you, I don't smoke. And seeing how just that simple change in verbiage, that simple mind shift, now that is what's going to keep you on the path of not, falling off the wagon, for example. So what
Mhm.
I try to bake into my curriculum is even how the students interact with me. How do you communicate with me? I expect professional level writing on all of our exams. If it's a multiple choice exam, you have to use cites. You have to explain your response. You have to, if you are having a problem or an issue, you can't come to class. How are you communicating with me? So I always stress that to my students. I kind of get them to change their behavior, if that makes sense. So I think, especially in being a paralegal, it's not just about teaching the hard skills, the technical stuff, and all of that. It's a behavior and the mindset change as well because of the type of industry that we're in. So I kind of bake that into even how they navigate the course. how they navigate the curriculum. Are you just asking me questions or did you research this first? So of course, and there's always there's three E words that I use: elevate, empower, and educate. And in my opinion, you can't have one without the other. If I'm educating and I'm truly doing my job, I'm also elevating and empowering. If I'm empowering, I'm elevating and educating. If I'm elevating, I'm empowering and educating. So you see how that kind of just all fits together. So even if a student sends me a message, for example, I ask them, hey, did you research this first? Did you try to come up with the answer first? I'll be more than happy to help you, but let's see if we can problem solve and work through this together. So even in how I teach the course and how I expect my students to interact with me, I think to some degree that forces a behavior change. And I have gotten feedback from the students when they're like, I'm way more confident now. I'm a paraleader. Like and I just kind of love when I see the light bulbs go off and I see trust yourself. Oh, I could have figured this out without just asking you, for example. And by the end of the course, usually I see just so much elevation just coming from that education and empowering that's baked into how I even teach the course and interact with the students.
Wow, wow, wow. Tracey Perkins is the future legal professional. She is she embodies, exemplifies, right? Everything that we really hope to teach this next generation of paralegals. This operational excellence, this practice makes progress on this lifelong journey, right, to operational excellence and to really, leading a really satisfying career. I mean, I think that is something where their opportunity abounds, is that we really can be these career architects. We
Oh,
can
yeah.
design our careers in such a way, just like what Kelly's student did, right? I had no idea that was
Yeah.
even a possibility for me. So,
Yeah.
how outstanding. In season 2, we started this thing, Kelly and I, in our podcast. It's called the lightning round. So, if you would kindly entertain us in these 3 questions that we have for you in the lightning round,
Let's do it.
Tracey. Yeah, right. So first one hiring red flag that educators should help students eliminate.
Oh my God. Just one? Okay. I know it's lightning round. Communication.
Good. That was an excellent one. Absolutely. And the second question, one skill that immediately increases employability.
One skill. One. Problem solving, critical thinking.
Oh, good. Awesome. I was going to say, oh my gosh, is it communication again? Because I would have said
It is.
Communication.
so
My mind had to go to the second thing that I thought of.
That was really good, though. And then our last question for this lightning round is one mindset shift that transforms someone's career trajectory.
Take yourself serious. You have a voice. You have value. You make an impact on day one.
I love this. I love it. That was like, I think, our fastest lightning round we've had yet. So well done, Tracey. Well done. So, today's conversation really reinforces for me and hopefully for all of us here that paralegal education must really evolve beyond static training. We need to be producing and empowering professionals who can think strategically, who can leverage technology responsibly, confidently, and who can also communicate value clearly. And also, don't forget, let's all learn to believe in the power of you, right? There's so much power in believing in ourselves and going after what we dream of. Tracey, do you have any closing insights you'd like to share with us today?
Absolutely. Just to piggyback off of what Kelly said so eloquently, on day one, you are a person. Trust yourself, trust your IP, your intellectual property. Think about your professional brand and how you want to show up in this industry day to day. Take yourself serious.
Thank you so much, Tracey Perkins. Yes, take yourself seriously. Thank you so much, Tracey Perkins, for this amazing episode 1 of season 3 of AFP's Legal Luminaries, the Paralegal Edition. So next month, we're exploring the coaching pedagogy, how educators can build practice-ready graduates using coaching models instead of traditional lecture frameworks. As always, a special thank you to Doug Lusk and the National Society for Legal Technology and for the continued support on our post-production of this podcast. Until next time.
Thank you.
Bye.